Welcome again. The Kazimierz Pułaski Foundation has just launched the report on the future of Europe and Poland's position. It was funded by the Open Society Foundation, and we are hosting today the author of the report, Piotr Maciej Kaczyński, who is very well-known analyst. He has been working many years in the Center for European Policy Studies in Brussels. He was working in the European Parliament, and he's got a huge knowledge on European integration and prepared that report. And I must say, what struck me, Piotr, in this report, that you start the debate about the future of Europe with the part on Ukraine. Why is this the case?
Well, this is the case because the debate in Europe, not only in Poland or different countries, but the debate in Europe about future of Europe is basically about what's going on in the east of Europe right now. So the war that Russia is conducting against Ukraine, this is basically a big parameter for what's going to happen with the future of Europe. So we need to think about it, what's going to happen with Ukraine. And if we think about it, that this war will let's say will end sometimes in the future, and we're not talking about the war, then will Ukraine join European Union? This is the biggest question out there. And right now, the biggest obstacle, potential obstacle, is bilateral issues between Poland and Ukraine.
This is also what struck me, because, of course, geopolitically, we may argue that Ukraine is the biggest thing now and the result of the war. However, you start determining what's going on in Poland's view on the future of Europe by bilateral relation between Poland and Ukraine. Tell us more about it.
Because bilateral issues are very important for everybody. Look at what was going on between Slovenia and Croatia. What is going on between Bulgaria and North Macedonia, and in the past between Greece and North Macedonia. But on the positive side, we wouldn't have European Union if the Franco-German bilateral relations were not having a new chapter in 1950. So this is exactly what's going on here. And we have some big historical issues between Poland and Ukraine. And we need to take care of those issues before, or not maybe before, but in parallel to when Ukraine is trying to be a member of European Union.
You talked to different political parties in Poland. Tell us, what did you find out?
About Ukraine?
About everything, about the future of Europe and also Ukraine, because this is deterministic, as you suggest.
Right. So what I have found out about the Polish parties is that there's a big consensus out there between different parties that basically, look, in Poland we have two big camps. One is led by Donald Tusk, the Prime Minister, and another camp is led by Jarosław Kaczyński, leader of Law and Justice. And if you look at those two big parties, they pretty much have a very similar perspective on the future of Europe, because they both are saying no treaty change, and both are saying Ukraine in the EU, yes. They have different opinion about historical issues with Ukraine, but when the big questions are there, whether we should change the treaties, they both say no. And whether we should accept Ukraine in the European Union, yes.
But they are coming from a very different position, because, of course, Law and Justice is an anti-federal, we may say.
Yeah.
On the other side, Civic platform believes in strong Europe.
Yeah.
So why they come to one conclusion regarding the possibility of changing the treaty in Ukraine?
Because, as you say, Law and Justice. For Law and Justice, the opening up the treaties is a possibility for strengthening negotiations and strengthening European integration. So Law and Justice is afraid that if we open the treaties, especially now with pro-European government in Warsaw, then it will lead to even more European issues, more Europe, right? This is what they are actually afraid of. And then if you ask Donald Tusk and the Civic platform, they are afraid that if we are opening the treaties, this is a Pandora box. That somebody somewhere out there is going to block it, like Orban in Hungary, and it's not going to contribute to anything positive.
How this position is viewed in Europe? Because there were huge expectations when there was a change of government in Poland, and I think many people are surprised that Poland and Polish government takes such a position.
Absolutely. If you look at the mainstream, so to speak, Brussels offer is there between Berlin and Paris. So the offer between Macron and Scholz has been more Europe, more federalistic or Euro-federalistic responses, and the Brussels institutions comply. We had this proposal from the European Parliament last year that was embraced a priori by President von der Leyen on multiple occasions, that the treaties needs to be opened up, especially in the context of foreign policy. But that is not exactly what is shared outside. There is a massive opposition to this view, not only coming from Warsaw. So the expectation was that Tusk coming in, former head of European Council, he will just embrace what Macron and Scholz are offering. This has not happened. And the answer that Polish government is providing is that, this is again quote from Tusk, it is pre-war circumstances that we are living in, when we have to take care of the security first, and then we can debate the future of Europe.
Would you agree with the argument when I observed Donald Tusk, and he was president of the European Council? And I think that his two cadences were dominated by the crisis-driven Europe. And he was in the middle of that crisis responsible for the council, and that shaped dramatically his perspective. And he is now much more intergovernmental, because at that time European Council was meeting so often that he does not seize that role of strengthening all the European institutions, all the triangle so-called, but he wants to have the European Union driven by member states. Is this correct analysis?
It's to some extent it is the right analysis. There's a very important scholar out there. He's called Luc van Middelaar, and he has been a speechwriter, for example, for the former president of the European Council as well. And Luc is writing in his books that between 2010 and 2020 or 22, there was it's a managing a crisis. Every month, every quarter, there's a crisis. Economic, migration, before Brexit, before the big crisis that we have right now with COVID and the war in Ukraine. So what Van Middelaar is saying is that the paradigm has shifted into crisis management, and crisis management in Europe is done by European Council with provisions from countries, budget provisions, for example, from the European Commission. But at the end of the day, it will be European Council taking care of this. But apart from that, we still have this enormous machine out there that is changing landscape outside of this crisis mode as well. So we cannot say that this is only crisis mode, and Tusk must see this. And I think he is seeing this, because it's important for him to have a good relations with von der Leyen, for example. And there's a council presidency next year, Polish council presidency, which is not about the mode of a crisis mode, but it is about basically everything else as well.
Well, under Polish presidency, there is an expectation, and it was stated by the European Council of June that year, that Poland will introduce the progress report on the future of Europe. What would you expect? Because it will be shortly before the presidential election in Poland, which is all about the future of the political system and political constellation.
Right. I mean, what we see very clearly is that Tusk is scared in domestic politics about opening up any debate on the future of Europe, because this, according to him, is opening up a door for all the nationalistic perspective out there. So he prefers to keep it checked as long as possible. So I would imagine that either this report will be delayed post-Polish elections. So, for example, June European Council, June 2025 European Council, which would be after Polish presidential elections, or maybe even into the next semester, which is not untypical if you look in the past, that those deadlines are not so strict in the European Council. So I'm not so hopeful that the Poles will take up this issue, because they are basically saying, don't change the treaties.
But do you think when we look into the future and we will have the union of almost 40 countries, of course it will not happen overnight, but it's a serious question how to manage the European Union of such many member states. Do you think that Polish position and this government position may evolve over time after presidential election?
I think the big problem out there is domestic politics again, because according to the Polish government right now, this is not a full-fledged democracy. We have problems with rule of law. We have problems with constitutional tribunal. We have probably problems with the constitution itself that probably will be the next chapter to be opened up after the presidential elections. So the question is, fix the problems first here before you go out. And but the real question out there is that there's never good timing for debating issues such as treaty change, because there's somebody going to have a problem with this. Today it's Poland. Tomorrow will be somebody else who's a problem. 2027, France, for example.
And let me ask you that last question. Imagine you are an advisor to Prime Minister of Poland. What would you recommend from your point of view?
My point of view is that there's always a middle way. And the middle way is something that the Union tried in the past, and I'm writing this in this report as well, the Schengen method. The Schengen method was used almost 40 years ago to introduce something new, innovative, and the basic principle out there was, if you want to join it, you can. If you don't want to join it, no problem. But those who want to join it, why don't you stop them? So, for example, you can imagine that the issue of security, that the Poles are this is a very important issue for Poland right now, that there is a new room for a new security treaty between some countries, without probably Austria or Ireland, who are neutral, but let's say between Poland, France, and Germany, and other partners out there. And this treaty is opened to some partners, and then we have this treaty, this important security issue, which would be an important step forward, and with a perspective to be like Schengen was. Schengen was taken into the European Union only about 10 years later. So maybe this will happen with security treaty.
Thank you so much, Piotr, for this analysis. And I strongly encourage you to read the report. You can go to www.pulaski.pl, so you can find it on our web pages. We'll have more reports of this kind and more discussion of this kind, because this is a very important subject, especially on the eve of Polish presidency in the Council of the European Union. So thank you, Piotr, and see you soon on this.
Absolutely.